or let's get into this aspect, the more like psychological repercussions of watching porn. Do you know what happens to a developing brain or even an adult brain if you get addicted to porn? Is the porn addiction thing real?
So there's so much debate around this. Some people want to kind of split hairs over whether they can call it addiction or whether they have to call it, compulsive or sexual compulsivity. And, there's people all over the world who are, by the thousands, young men in forums saying that they can't control their porn use and that they want help, right? And so whether you call it addiction or sexual compulsion, I think these people do need help if they can't control that and it's having a detrimental effect on their life. I'm not an expert in the brain science of porn addiction. So that's, I focus on, the actual criminal content that's being distributed and all fair. Of that. But there is a really good book called Your Brain on Porn. There's an organization called the Reward Foundation. There's lots of neuroscientists who are looking at this and trying to understand the implications of it. But, there's people who are saying it's causing depression, anxiety. They're also, saying that they have an issue where, they may start out with one type of porn and they never imagined that they would kind of go down this rabbit hole. I've
heard this, yeah.
Where I think it's called habituation or desensitization, where they don't just need more porn to get that same dopamine hit, where they need different kinds of porn. So they need more novelty. And then they end up going, more violent, maybe younger. And they end up even sometimes as consumers of CSAM, child sexual abuse material, when they didn't actually start out as a pedophile. Like they then went down that road because of, the teen categories and then kind of going more and more extreme, younger, more violent, things like that, which is super detrimental.
I used to think that sounded crazy. Not that I was ever an expert in this at all. I was like, there's no way like a porn addiction's an addiction like a drug addiction. Like that doesn't make sense. But then over the last, I guess it'd be maybe 3 or 4 years, once I found out about Pornhub and all this, because I knew a little bit about it, I've been talking to more and more people my age, but like men mostly, who were like, yeah, I had a hard time dropping it. And yeah, I was desensitized. And yeah, I did make relationships harder, all this, which I don't know enough about the stats. I'll have to have somebody on the podcast to talk about it because I was like, I don't think I've heard from as many women that it does that to women.
Yeah.
But I can understand if you're getting this dopamine spike constantly, that it could be addictive.
Yeah. And there are a lot of people who are saying that. I mean, just anecdotally, I get messages all the time from especially young men, but also women who say that they cannot stop. They want to stop and they can't. And sometimes they're messaging me because they're saying, well, finally, for the first time, I feel like maybe I have the ammunition knowing that there's a victim on the other side of the screen to stop me from doing what I don't want to do. And thank you for that. Like I needed that ammunition to give me the fortitude to actually stop. But they're telling me all the time, like, I want to, and I can't. And so if you want to do something and you can't, and you feel like it's bad for you, whatever we call it, like, let them get help. And I think one of the horrible things is that there are people out there that are trying to give people help, and they're being attacked all the time. They're being, it's hard. It's really hard because there is so much financial interest from the porn industry to make sure that, this doesn't seem like it could be a problem for people.
Yeah. And that's probably, I came from, I don't know what your background is, but like growing up in Toronto, super liberal. And so my view until more recently was like, kind of control yourself. It's fine. Let people do whatever they want. Which like, I still I don't even know what I think right now. I'm going to have to sit on that and think about it. But a vanilla example, I suppose, would be I stopped watching horror movies. I was obsessed with horror movies as a kid. And this is, like I said, a vanilla example. But I got completely desensitized to horror movies. And I was like, I got to a point, I think it was probably after I had a baby, where I was like, I don't really want to see that anymore. Or it was after I stopped taking antidepressants, probably. I was like, I don't want to watch horror movies anymore. And I stopped. And the first time I saw a horror movie, which was like 4 years after I stopped watching them, I was like, oh my gosh, blood, like gore. This is crazy. And so I think you can probably desensitize yourself as a human to content. Because when you stop watching certain content, it's shocking. And I can see that easily happening.
Well, that's the neuroplasticity. Because just like, the brain pathways, they can connect in certain ways, right? It's kind of like, they call it, it's like plastic, right? It's bendable, but it goes both ways. So if you make those negative pathways or the desensitization and all of that stuff that happens, habituation, and I'm not a neuroscientist, but I have read enough about this to understand that there, Dr. Donald Hilton, he's actually a brain surgeon, and he's been investigating porn addiction for a long time. And he talks about neuroplasticity, but he says, if you actually stop, right, then you can actually retrain your brain pathways to, undo the damage that has been done. So that's really encouraging, I think, to a lot of people to know that, so probably when you stopped watching the horror movies for a long time, and then when you saw them again, it was shocking to you because you had kind of maybe undone some of that habituation and desensitization in your brain.
I was surprised because I used to watch them with absolutely no like emotional response, really. Now I was on antidepressants, so it's hard to say like what that was doing as well. But I was surprised the first time I saw the beginning of because I didn't watch it. I was like, nope, that's too much for me. So I thought, I'm sure it's easy to desensitize yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, wild.
Yeah, and that does happen. And I think there was just a research paper out of the University of New South Wales. I just read Dr. Michael Salter. So he investigates child sexual abuse material. He's a professor, and he puts out studies. And what it was summarizing what they had looked at, and they saw that there is some connections between people who are daily porn consumers, who have a hypersexuality, that are viewing these kinds of categories like teen, like incest, like the very violent content, and actual they're showing a correlation between that and people acting out upon actual children and actually consuming real child sexual abuse material. So like there is a concern here for people who are viewing, especially these problematic kinds of pornographic content. Definitely.
Yikes.
Yeah. Not that everybody does it.
No.
There's people who can watch that content and never act out, right? But there's also a concern that it can lead certain people down that path to act out.
That makes sense. You have to be careful with your brain. It's a very plastic entity, like you said.
Yeah.